Well, hello, everyone. I want to thank everybody for attending this presentation. It is certainly an honor to have the opportunity to present at the Festival of High Temperatures. Such an incredible event, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of community, a lot of networking, definitely a lot of hot. So when Michal asked me to present, I thought, well, this could be an interesting opportunity to look back and present my journey of where I came from and where I am today. And I say a journey because it's interesting how each part of your journey leads to another part, and taking advantage of opportunities is always important. Let me share the screen and we'll begin. Full screen. There we go. So I teach sculpture at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. I'm also a distinguished faculty research fellow, and I teach sculpture, 3D design, and 3D printing. And yes, as I talked about earlier, 30 years, it seems like where'd the time go? So this is my journey. And, you know, I became involved in cast metal really because of the process. I enjoyed, again, working with people. It required a lot of camaraderie, community. And that's what's so much that's what I enjoy most about it. There's a lot of parts. There's, you know, not only do you have to melt the metal, but then you have to make the mold, and then you have to chase the casting, and then you have to put a patina on it. And then we're hoping that we're making good art at the same time. There was always, you know, it's magnetic, people say. There's a, you know, rich history. But again, it's about making art, making sculpture in cast metal. So I thought I'd start off, these are some recent castings of mine, just to give you a sense of my work, this Tonka Buster. And I have a, you know, variety of different types of work. Some are small scale, playful, nostalgic. Others are made out of wood and cast metal. Certainly this idea of colorization is important. Then to larger scale, indoor pieces. And I have to say that, you know, after a certain point in time, you know, you think, oh, I want to make my castings really big. I want to make big sculpture. And then as you realize, well, you make it big and it becomes heavy and it becomes more difficult. So I always thought, well, let me combine this wood along with the cast iron, and that way I can get iron up into space, which has made sense to me. And then of course I do outdoor sculpture, and I'm not limited to cast iron, cast aluminum, cast bronze, although not so much bronze anymore these days. So I thought, looking back, you know, there's always a tremendous amount of people that you look back and go, wow, had I not taken a class from Philip, had I not gone to MCAD and taken a class from Michael, I would never have met John Poole, which I would have never probably met Wayne Potratz or Jenny Nellis or Coral, or then again, Meredith Jack, and then specifically Donnie Keene, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and of course, Michal. And again, the list can go on, but I thought I'd, you know, say hello to these people. And I didn't start out as a sculptor. I started out as a graphic designer and then went into printmaking. Of course, drawing has always been important. But this was a time when I was going to Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and the foundry in Minneapolis had an opportunity for all the students at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, University of Minnesota, to come to the foundry and cast a piece of iron and include neon with it. And then they would show it in a downtown gallery. And of course, I knew nothing about cast iron. I knew nothing about anything. I knew how to draw. I knew how to print. And of course, since I was making a lot of imagery of shoes, why not start out big and make this big shoe at Smith Foundry in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I was way, way above my pay grade and needed a lot of assistance, namely the artist in resident at Smith Foundry, which I'll introduce in a second. But nonetheless, this is my really big shoe, very first casting, 1 meter long. And I have to, I think this was a time where I just said, okay, I found my place. The foundry was smoky, dirty, hot, and it was kind of exciting and it's stinky. And this particular foundry, of course, industrial foundry, and they have an induction furnace. There's John Poole, the artist in resident, who I met during this opportunity and really learned a lot about foundry, about mold making, about metal and temperature and gating, and all of these incredible things that, I look back and say, wow, if I'd never met him, I might not be doing what I'm doing at all. And here's the picture of their furnace. It's an induction furnace, and here's the employee opening the lid and then charging it. And this particular furnace holds 7,300 kilograms of iron at any given time. And when the temperature is correct, they tilt it and pour their metal into a larger buggy or ladle. In this case, this ladle holds about 2,000 pounds. And the rest of the iron is left in the furnace so that when they charge it again, it takes less time to melt. Once the iron's poured into this large buggy, then it's transferred into smaller ladles, and each ladle goes in different parts of the foundry. And what was so amazing about this foundry was I could make things, but it taught me that you had to make it and you had to get it done in 1 day. You couldn't leave your mold there for 2 days. At the end of the day, they had a cleanup crew that swept the floor and started for the next day. The other incredible thing was their sand mixing machine, because all you had to do was push a button and all the chemicals are mixed and go into your mold. Pretty fascinating. And of course, the sand then sets within 5-10 minutes, give or take. And oftentimes, as I moved on in my career, I would bring student molds. We'd make them at the university or make them at the college I taught at, and bring them in. They pour them, and we get them out. It'd be that simple. And there, no work really here. You didn't melt the metal. You didn't break up the metal. You didn't even pour the metal. All you did was point where the metal was going to go, and you were done. Which, had I not had that opportunity, I may have never decided to take a class in cast metal sculpture with Wayne Potratz over on the left and get involved in the many things that he knew. So I learned, other things about cast metal, maybe more about the content of the metal, of the sculpture that you're making. This is a picture of their furnace, a typical coupolette designed by Cliff Prokoff, which you're going to see a lot of this design because I guess that's what I learned on, and I enjoy it for all kinds of reasons using that furnace. Other people have other thoughts. And I cast, and the one thing that I would say to, maybe we have some beginning people in the audience is, if it's like everything. If you want to learn something, you got to do it a lot. You can't just make 1 or 2 drawings and say you're done. It's if you're going to be in cast metal, you got to make a lot of cast metal parts, and that's what I proceeded to do. And I show these because they're kind of so wretched and they're so primitive. But I learned a lot about mold making and what to do, what not to do. Which after graduate school at the University of Minnesota, you know, I got another opportunity, and it was an international conference. I'd never even been out of the state of Minnesota, other than Canada, maybe Wisconsin. And this particular conference was taking place at Sloss Furnaces, a national landmark, and it's in Birmingham, Alabama. And man, I got to tell you, the first time I went, I was in total awe. I mean, this is 2 furnaces. You can see one on the left, and then there's another one that you can't see, which is on the right. And each furnace made pig iron. That was the industry. They made iron for other foundries to cast and pour it into molds. And they didn't make just a little bit of pig iron. It was a lot of pig iron, you know, anywhere from 100 tons a day. I don't know what kilograms that equals. And here we are with John Poole. And I thought I was so cool. You know, I thought, oh, I know a lot about cast metal. And you know, I kind of look back at this going, who in the right mind wears a white shirt to a conference, to a cast iron conference? And I was working with a friend of mine who was a graduate student at Southern Illinois, and we worked together. He brought a furnace to the conference, and I want to say that's when I really learned a lot about the actual melting the metal and what to look for. And Tim Wilson, the one on the left, his professor walked around with me and said, you know, look at this, you feel that, you understand that. And that's really where I learned how to really melt metal. And just the whole idea of being around so many people with so many, the same interests. Everybody was in love with making metal, some shape or form. And the furnaces were all different shapes. You know, no more cupola. You know, I was like, what is that? And like, well, that's a cupola. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I realized, you know, at this conference, I needed to learn a lot more. And I proceeded, because once you're here, you go, wow, all these furnaces, all this in energy. And, you know, and I thought, well, time to make your own. I met this guy too, Meredith Jack. And his idea was to, you could go to any hardware store and buy a few items and make your own furnace within a day, and then pour metal and be done, making it more accessible, you know. And so, you know, this is famous trash can furnace. They went to the hardware store, bought, cut a few holes, lined it with refractory, and that was the day. His name was Meredith Jack. We're going to see more of him in a bit. So with that knowledge, I came back to Minnesota. I was now teaching at the College of Visual Arts, and I thought, oh man, I need my own furnace. That's it. Hold on, I got to check my time here. And so I thought, well, I'll make a furnace, and the first pour will be called iron test pour. And we made it. It was all shiny and beautiful. It worked great, and the college loved it. The students loved it. That's when I understood that, you know, there's something about this material, this idea of pouring iron. You know, if you pour it, they will come. Because then we went on to the next adventure, and that was the field of iron, the Herman annual iron pour, which was in a small town in Minnesota, maybe about, I don't know, 400 people. And that first year that we did this, you know, like 80 people showed up, and we all camped, and we made molds, we ate, we drank, and we did other things. And we had a number of furnaces. So we, you know, coordinate all of this so everybody can bring, you know, their own furnace, and we'd all be pouring. And we always had a community base to it, so that the community could make objects, you know, probably a cast iron tile, but then we did other things because this was at a park. And so we would make sculpture for the park. The woman in the blue helmet, that's my mother-in-law. I always like to say, if I can get my mother-in-law to pour iron, I'm good to go. We also had parades. I mean, what would be a festival, annual iron pour without a parade? Nobody really watched those first couple of years, but the town, the community, they started to give in. And of course, at this time, I bought a little trailer, named myself Hog Iron Works. Here's some other images of the sculpture that we made for the park. And again, this was all community-based. So families would come in and make marks into the sand, and then we would make molds and then cast them, and they would be on site. And it's always, again, it's always that group of people that you work with, that you sweat with, that you exchange ideas with. That's the exciting part. And since I had this furnace, I might as well go. Let's cast iron. I went to Franconia Sculpture Park for their first annual iron pour. There's a photo of on the left-hand top of the pattern. Of course, I wasn't going to make anything small, and typical pattern made out of styrofoam and paper, and then made molds of it, and then poured this piece, which ended up of this nature. And, you know, just the understanding of, well, if I make the mold in layers, it's going to leave these marks. And that had a lot to do with the idea of the landscape and scarring the landscape. And the crew, that first crew, as you can see, some great people in this photo. Wayne Potratz, Coral is there, some of my former students. And you don't forget these people. Since I had a furnace, I could go anywhere. I went to the West Coast. John Poole and I worked with a group of people and sent them designs. See, the same furnace, sent them design. They built it. We poured metal in Santa Barbara, California. I traveled out to Providence, Rhode Island a couple times to pour at their festival, their iron festival. And then I moved to Texas. And Butch Jack, Meredith Jack, he was a leader in cast metal. And they had, Lamar University had a number of furnaces from crucible to cupolas. And I just fell into the right place. And we have a wonderful foundry. You see that furnace, same design. That was something that we built later on. And the crew. This is back at SLOS furnaces for another conference, because who can not ever want to go to SLOS? But these are great people, and I'm still friends with each and every one of them today. And that's where I met Donnie Keen. I'm going to have to speed it up here a little bit. And I say Donnie Keen because Donnie Keen is most smartest man, most generous man of all of Texas, I swear. And I met him through Meredith Jack, and he had and Donnie had a relationship, and Meredith would come in and make molds and pour with Donnie. And when I met Donnie, I thought, well, I'm pretty much in heaven today. His furnace, it's about, I don't know what, it's about 25, 30 feet tall. So that's about 7 meters. And his furnace tapped out about 2,000 pounds of iron every 20 minutes. But I learned something new, and this was a different situation than Smith Foundry. I could make molds and spend my time there. You know, I didn't have to make something and get it out the same day. Donnie was so generous. He would let you make the molds. Okay, well, we're going to pour next week, and then you'd help him pour. And sometimes it would be at night, sometimes it would be the day. And you know, I just have such admiration. You know, he knew how to do a lot of things, and it was a real pleasure to work with for almost 20 years. He's now retired, and the foundry is no longer in operation, but he knew how to drive that Bobcat and clean up that floor, and everything was industrial. It was different than Smith Foundry. This was a whole different process. And, you know, we didn't use wood flasks, we used metal flasks, because why would you want to make a big mold with a wood flask and have to flip it? No, we're going to use a metal flask and hook it up to the crane. Everything's bigger in Texas. Look at that mold, 6 feet, 7 feet tall. Mary Neubauer's mold. There's one of our former students. You know, you got to get in the furnace to put in the bottom sand, and you got to get out. The close-up shot of his furnace. And everything was immediate. He was using Pepset, which I learned quickly that Pepset melts foam. I like that. And I could make molds very, very quickly. I can make multiple piece molds. You can see the one on the right. The pink part is the actual casting. The white foam are the false pieces. Mold release. I know you might be saying, well, how come the mold is black? It's because it recoups the sand and the carbons build up over time. But this mold, you know, done in a morning and put together, mold made, taken apart, and put together, and good to go. And then we go to lunch. This was a few days' work, and I would, you know, I'd get a couple of friends. There's sometimes I'd say, Greg Ruder, come on, let's go to Smith Foundry this weekend. Donnie's going to pour on Sunday. So we'd get there on Friday, go to town, make molds on Saturday, and pour with Donnie. It's a typical run. I learned other things. Why use materials if you don't have to? It just costs money. So he never used mold glue. He never put cups on his molds. He only weighted them down with these weights. The hand weights weigh about 30 kilos, if I'm thinking right. And there's a lot of them. So at that point, well, since we have this incredible industrial foundry, I know I'm getting close to time, why not set up an invitational symposium and invite people to come in and make big things? And we did. And Donnie loved it. And he set up his one area of kind of a place to go eat. And we'd make dinner for everybody every night. And we'd get there on Wednesday and pour on Sunday. Pour on Saturday so we could clean up on Sunday and go home. So it was quick. It was immediate. It was fast. And we did this, I don't know, about 8 times, 8 different symposiums, faculty, artists from across the country, and they would bring in a student. So it was this kind of exchange of knowledge. There's Wayne Potratz. I know that some of you might have met him. He was a participant a few years back, making a mold of his canoe. All piece molds, probably about 20 parts, and he made it all in, I think, about 3 days. One on the right is Mary Neubauer. She actually made 2 of these forms. She looks a little run down because, again, a lot of work. Maybe we should have had a week for this project of Mary's, but we did it in 3 days. Cope, drag, core, 2 of them. Those weights, that's 300 pounds, it's about 150 kilos, each one of those round discs. And you can see that there's quite a few on that mold. And I believe that's Wayne Potratz's canoe. And here's the final castings. Rough chased, and Donnie made crates and sent them to Minnesota and Arizona. So if we got this going on, might as well have the Texas Atomic Iron Commission. Why not? And involve people, faculty, artists, students across the state of Texas. I know it sounds pretty serious. And these are the 3 people that I work with: Jeff Broderick, Robbie Barber, and Greg Ruder. They were really, they were the co-conspirators, and we poured everywhere. And I say when we poured, people would say, will you come and have an iron pour? We'd say, yes, it will be $2,500. And then we'd divvy up the profits and exchange. And it really was about this whole idea of working together with multiple universities across the state of Texas. That's so popular, we even had to buy a van. Now, just FYI, it's a tall Texas tale. We didn't own the van. Didn't even make it. So through all that, I went to Germany and met Hans Molsberger. And we decided that perhaps we could have a symposium, and let's just add one more thing, cast metal and 3D printing. So this takes place every summer, not last summer because of the pandemic, but it's going to happen this summer. And we usually get about 10 people from across the country and Europe, and they spend 3 weeks, and we do a lot of great things. And again, we pour and the community comes, just like they did in Herman, Minnesota, just like they did when we poured at Texas Women's University. Communities love this. Same furnace design, classic clip Prokoff. So I can't end it without saying you should probably think about going to the International Conference of Contemporary Cast Iron Art, which will be taking place in September of next year in Berlin. So this is like not too far away. And I hope that you can attend. It'll be great. So lastly, I just want to say, and I try to repeat this often, it's not how big your furnace is. It's not how fast your furnace is. It's not how much metal it pours. All of those are good, but it's more about the art that you produce. That's the important thing. And that's why I enjoy cast metal. Melting the metal, making the molds, chasing the castings, putting the patinas on to make sculpture. So I want to thank everybody. You certainly can contact me, kjdyrhaug@lamar.edu if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you again, folks. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.